everyone. I'm Mike Urbans, and welcome to It's Your Water. I'm glad you found us. Today, as promised, is the return of the distinguished Mike Heatwole of A. Smith North America Water Treatment. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, welcome back. We have you back because you've had some really, really good topics. And recently, if you haven't caught the podcast, it's really good. Mike joined us for a very informative topic on reading the water in the toilet tank and that how it helps us assess potential water quality issues. I highly, highly recommend that podcast as a preamble to this one. And you'll find out all about Mike Heatwole if you don't know him, if you've lived under a rock somewhere, on that podcast intro. But today, we're discussing the Troublesome Trio. Mike, what the heck is the Troublesome Trio? I know it. We want our listeners to know it because they probably know who they are. But what is it?
Yeah, it's like knowing your neighbors, right? You sort of know them. They're right there all along, but sometimes you just never think about how they might know each other and interact. So Back in my day when I started studying through WQA, and we had to do it the old-fashioned way. You had textbooks that you read, and you had chapters with questions in the back, and you could self-study and work your way through, and you tried to get your hands on those textbooks, Wes McGowan books and stuff. That is still what the industry baselines everything on today. But there was a term thrown out in there in one of the chapters, or it was a prelude to several of the chapters, and it was called Dealing with the Troublesome Trio. I wish I was the one who coined that phrase, and I'm not, but apparently I've kind of brought it back again. It concerns things we deal with all the time, but we sometimes don't think about how they relate and interact with each other. And the big three are iron, manganese, and hydrogen sulfide. So after hardness, they're probably the nuisance issues we run into in the water treatment industry that causes our day-to-day grief, right? That's what my work with the Troublesome Trio is what drove me to develop the Toilet Talk, because it was trying to find all the clues that I could get my hands on to be able to decipher what's different, what's alike. And as we're designing treatment systems, what works, what fails, and how they interact. It's the three biggies: iron in all of its forms, manganese in all of its forms, and then the one that's a little obscure, the gas one, is the hydrogen sulfide.
Right. And sometimes, well, we'll talk about it, you could probably get all three together. It's the kitchen sink, I call it.
Yep. And you do. Manganese is generally almost always found in conjunction with iron. Usually it's in lesser quantities, and I say usually because there's exceptions to every rule, and every geology formation you get into has its own individual nuances. Down here in the Shenandoah Valley, and we have extremely high levels of manganese up and down the valley. You go to other parts of the state, and they rarely ever see it or run into it. And it reacts differently in different geologies that you're at. For the water well industry, I've done several talks on the geophysical areas, zones of geology and water formation that you have down in the ground. And how does that determine what type of water quality you're going to have and what kind of issues are you potentially going to have? Like in Virginia, we have 7 zones, 7 distinct geophysical regions that all have their uniqueness to them, if you will. And that can make your hair fall out. So that's why I don't have a lot anymore.
Me either. I was told that there could be up to 1,200 species of manganese because of the way it reacts, the way the metal, it came from the earth, it came from the geology, it came from, but not that many of iron and not that much sulfur. They're pretty much ferric, ferrous, bacterial. Iron can combine with
And
things.
colloidal. Don't forget
Colloidal.
colloidal.
Oh, yeah. But manganese, it seems like that is the most troublesome of the trio.
And it is because of the three, most of us or most of the people listening to the call are probably pretty familiar with iron, how to deal with it, whether you have the ferrous iron, ferric iron. We talked about looking in the back of the toilet for being a great place to identify the potential of iron bacteria and those organic slimes that show up there. And by hook or crook, a lot of people have dealt with manganese just because they're dealing with iron. So manganese, it's usually in less quantities than iron. And a lot of times the treatment options are similar. But with that said, when you get into your heavier levels, and we're talking iron stains at 0.3 parts per million, we're talking manganese staining at 0.05 parts per million.
Doesn't take much, yeah.
Doesn't take much, and you can detect it even at much lower levels than that. You can smell it, you can see negative results of it building up within plumbing systems, especially hot water recirculating systems and things. But the kinetics of manganese are slower than they are with iron or even hydrogen sulfide. So it's very important to understand that, because that's why a lot of times you'll get bleed through on manganese with an iron treatment system that, in theory, looks like it should work for you, and yet you have failures at the job site, or what I call those jobs. Hey, everything worked great for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then it's when you get that call 6 months down the road that you find maybe all the parameters weren't what we thought they were going to be going in.
Yeah, and I say to everybody when I do my speaks that if you're removing hardness and you're in the Midwest and you remove hardness, and you maybe let 1 part per million of hardness go by, nobody's going to really notice, like, oh, honey, my water has 1 part per million of hardness in it. Oh, it does. But if you let 0.05 or 0.3 parts per million of iron sneak through your treatment system, you might as well not have a treatment system, because
Correct.
Instantly they see it in stained clothes, stained fixtures, stained everything. And so you got to nail it. You got to nail your treatment of iron and manganese.
And so you really have to educate yourself, and different technologies work in different regions, right? You get into northern climates and you've got guys removing a lot of iron with fine mesh resins and low pH and getting tremendous results. The further south we go, it doesn't work like that because of our temperatures raise, we have to go ahead and bump the pH up to get the iron to fall out. And so you have to learn those regional intricacies, that why certain technology works in one area and may fail in another. And manganese is really that way. It was interesting kind of before COVID came along, and I don't remember the year, but we actually were discussing manganese at a WQA event in table settings, and the vast majority of the contractors really did not understand what manganese was, didn't even realize they had it in their areas, didn't test, and by hook or crook probably took care of some of it that was there because of the way they were treating their iron. And so they got lucky. In the valley where I'm at, you can't be lucky and get it. When you got 4 parts of manganese in the water and it's coming out
that's huge.
Liquid coal, yeah, you definitely are going to be dealing with that a lot different than if you're, right at 0.05 type situation. filtration. So it's really misunderstood and was really up for, I think a lot of us in the industry felt like it was probably EPA was taking a hard look at it and considering regulating it as a health contaminant. And there's been a lot of studies recently to show that, yes, indeed, manganese is potentially a health risk and not just as an aesthetic as we've always kind of dealt with it.
Yep.
Our friends to the north are regulating it now as a health contaminant.
Yeah, I think it's linked to Parkinson's, I believe.
Yep. Neurological deficiencies, especially again in young children. I've done not a lot of documented studies, but I work a lot in the ag industry with dairy and poultry. And I can tell you from my prior experience, when we have manganese in the water, we see animal health problems very significantly directly related to not at all high levels of manganese. Cows not being able to stay pregnant, aborting fetuses, chickens getting loose stools and building up ammonia in the poultry houses and those kind of things.
Yeah, that's a disaster.
Oh,
Yeah.
big time. So it's manganese is the one that I think we need to study a lot more and definitely don't use scare tactics with people. We never advocate that. But as contractors out in the field and water professionals, we need to educate ourselves a little more about the subject and be able to speak to it in a reasonable and professional manner.
But since the internet has come around, people are starting to bring stuff to us. They become a challenge. They're educated to, loosely, let's say, they're internet educated, and they'll come at you. And if you don't listen to Mike and Mike here, you can get in a little bit of an embarrassing situation out there these days. And so that's why it's real important to get your ducks in a row.
Yep. Somebody with a little bit of knowledge is a whole lot more dangerous than somebody that's totally unknowledgeable or a subject matter expert.
Yeah. I mean, treatment-wise, we don't have a ton of time because we had two more troublesomes to hit, but I've really had great success. Now, I'm located, my selling area is, nationwide, but really is the Northeast, Carolinas, north to New England. New England has a lot of manganese, but mostly a water softener, it will plate out on a resin and exchange off and rarely have any problems, and or we'll use the Ozone passive manganese green sand or pyrolusite products as they call it, and the manganese will bind to that material and convert, and you could backwash it off. But have you known any other treatments that really are great for manganese, better than the rest, or?
Well, again, we don't want to make this a sales show, but the zeolite medias have a huge affinity for manganese.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yep. So the synthetic zeolites that are used by certain manufacturers are definitely a plus. So I got to put my plug in there. Anybody knows me, know who I represent, probably know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So that is a great weapon to have in the arsenal for manganese and very successful. But typically the products you're talking about in green sand, it's just I find when you're using those products, at least in my area that I service, West Virginia, the Northern Carolinas, and up your way a little bit, Southern Pennsylvania, that we have to watch pH with it and keep the pH elevated to, again, because the kinetics of manganese are slower than they are for like iron. But a lot of very similar technology. What's so great about these is when you're using especially air over medius, we're using oxygen to bring into the backwashing filter, which many manufacturers are doing today. And then you combine that like an ozone generator. We're giving it a disinfectant. And I always call putting those medias on steroids when you add ozone to it. We're giving it everything we can And it mostly it's very effective for
And for
most general applications. And we can even pull hydrogen sulfide with it because we're oxidizing the sulfur from a gas to a solid.
Yeah. So I always tell people, like what your just analogy there, supercharging. I tell people if you're in drag racing, it's like putting nitrous oxide into the carburetor. That's what ozone gives us.
Exactly. I'm a huge fan of ozone with the technology today. I did it. I was using it back in my early career, but the technology and the equipment is so much better.
It's come
today.
a long way.
I struggle with technology being an old guy. We didn't even have calculators when I went to school. I had to write everything out the old fashioned way. And my first computer card was a punch card. But what we can do today is really quite amazing.
It is amazing. That's what's really changed. I kind of I can everything by saying like water is a finite chemistry. What's really been done to it has been you could chemically alter it in only so many ways. Only so many ways. I mean, there's not going to be some revolutionary crazy equipment, but what's revolutionized our industry is the electronics and how we treat everything.
The efficiency that we've gained with the computers, built-in sensor technology that's constantly being developed, metering our water. We are treating so much more water and wasting so much less water and using far less chemicals and things than we used to. So it's really exciting. And I know there's things being worked on the forefront. I may not be around to see it all come to fruition, but I think exciting times are definitely ahead for all of us.
All of us. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and how we treat it. There's guys in the labs, they're just trying to give us gifts all the time. We try not to make our people guinea pigs. Unless they want to be, I'll say, hey, try this.
Well, we have labs and engineers and scientists always working on this stuff before we get it out into the field.
So kind of like manganese is iron. Iron also is awful troublesome for the homeowner, stains everything, it ruins fixtures. So we could almost treat it like manganese, but what are your thoughts on iron?
So iron, what I run into, if you got ferrous, iron, they're pretty easy, right? You convert ferrous iron to ferric iron, you can pull it out or you can ion exchange it very readily on resins. Although we normally don't recommend a red resin softener for iron removal officially, right? Because you got to know where it works and where it doesn't. And then you get your iron bacterias, which then can coat medias and things up. So now we have to trap that, remove the food, which we do with the iron units, and then kill it with either chlorine or ozone and get it out that way. And then we do run into occasionally what we call the colloidal irons, which is those particles that are less than 1 micron in size. And then we have to use something like an ultrafilter to be able to pull those out.
That's like floater iron. It just doesn't settle out if you have a sample bottle, clear mason jar on your desk. And how long it takes, like a week for that stuff to get settle.
If it ever does.
If it ever does.
And the reason it doesn't settle, A, they're very small, very light particles, so gravity doesn't have much pull on them. And B, typically they all carry the same electrical charge. So they're always repelling each other and holding each other in suspension. And so to remove them, we either have to use something like an ultrafilter that we're really filtering very fine, or we have to coagulate them at a coagulant to the water, typically alum or some of the other commercial products that are out there, causing those particles now to change their polarity. Now they have opposites, so they attract to each other. They start to coagulate, form these little puffy clouds, if you will. And now we can physically filter it out of the water. And that can also work with manganese in hard cases where you can get colloidal manganese as well. So the nice thing is once you learn to do certain types of treatment technology, you can often apply it to whether it's iron or manganese. and sulfur to a degree, but sulfur being the gas, that's the one you have to test for on site. I always recommend testing on site regardless, because you're testing, it's going to be the most accurate right then and there. You take a manganese test, you take an iron test. Yeah, you can get a reading at a lab, but once it's exposed to oxygen and depressurized, it starts to convert. And so you may not see the exact form in the lab that you're actually dealing with on the job. And when I see failures in the field, it's usually because people did not test in the field.
Yes, and it's the white bucket, the clean white bucket, the clean styrofoam. Drinking are valuable tools for these troublesome trios, because you will see, and pump cycles, the other thing with iron is I see the stalactites that can break off, in that you get these pulses. You run that, bring your washing machine hose, and you run off the tank, you may get a hit off the tank tee because everything coagulates there, sits there with iron, settles. And you open it up full force, and then blah, you get a whole bunch of iron come out, but it'll start running clear. But I've seen, and you've seen, where iron bacteria, and you get these gelatinous masses, or stalactites, I like to call them, that build up in the plumbing system of the well, and you'll get clear, boom, dead cloudy, clear, boom, cloudy. And you have to really look for that too, because once you put a softener in and you get that pulse of brown, you're screwed. You got to have a filter for that, an iron filter.
You're so correct. Taking the time to test on site, to run the water off, to check, use your 5-gallon bucket to check your flow rates. Those are the things that you learn to do that keep you out of trouble. People don't like water treatment because they get these massive failures. And I hate to say it, but whenever I go out with a contractor, we're troubleshooting, problem solving, 99 times out of 100, if they would have followed our checklist, our suggested protocols, and checked all the boxes before they ever recommended the equipment, they would never have a problem downstream. But we get in a hurry. We rely on other testing and other people to do it because we don't have the time or the expertise to develop it. I'm old school. I learned to do all that on site, and I still preach that to this day, and I will continue to do that to my grave.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, other testing, lab testing, I highly recommend it. Some of the new devices out there, again, they're tools to have in your box. But to rely on just one or two tools exclusively, especially when you're dealing with the Troublesome Trio, expect some failures because they will happen.
You're playing roulette there. And back to our sulfur, is almost impossible to test for. It's an instantaneous gas off. So it's almost, you walk in the house, you smell it, or it's almost like, I'm just trying to think how to analyze those levels. I know Kevin Osborne, he has a good way of analyzing it. You open the front door and you're knocked over with sulfur.
Exactly.
They're nose blind in the house.
Well, actually, once you're at about 5 parts per million, your olfactory senses become immune to it. I mean, they just become numb. You can't really determine any more than that. That's why the miners always carried the canary in the bird cage to walk in, because they could smell and detect high level of gas that people couldn't. That's just the way our olfactory senses work. And Greg Gruett's got the thing, if you put your head in the sink and you can smell it, you're probably a half a part per million. If you stand up and kind of lean back, you're at a part per million. And then you take up to 5 steps away, and each step becomes an additional part per million. And it's a very, very general kind of way to do it. And it's a fun way to kind of train to explain how it works. But having a good on-site, and there are good sulfur test kits available in the marketplace that are simple to use. I personally kind of like the AccuVac one. It's easy, it's simple, it's pretty daggone reliable, but there are others out there as well. I always promote just get you a good test that you believe in and learn to use it and then use it. That's the equipment you want to get. But people forget water underground is under pressure. We pump it under pressure. We store it under pressure. When we get to the kitchen faucet and we open the faucet up, now we're depressurizing the water. Any dissolved gases that's in the water are suddenly released. And that's why you have to test it there. If I found when I had my lab and I could still test it at all in the lab, it had to be way, way up there. I'm talking 10 parts plus, even if the guy was only 15 minutes away and put it in a sealed bottle. So that, again, pH is the same way. It's tied to CO2 in the water. And I've seen pH change a full point in less than 10 seconds.
Yeah. Sulfur is really destructive too. In Ohio, it's extremely high and it's very corrosive, and it will destroy the electronics in a room. It will destroy copper wiring, switches, light switches. I mean, that's how bad. I'm like, people are living with this stuff.
Yep. And it's not only corrosive, it can explode if you trap it, and it can burn at high levels. It can kill you. I mean, we don't usually see it at those levels unless you're around real close to a mine or that type of facility, but it makes people nauseous and sick.
Well, in high levels, it's instant death. It's like you walk into the room, take a breath, bam, you're done. And we've had that. We're not scaring people out there. This is like extreme mining cases, extreme concentrated in a building case. It's that bad. And we were always drilled at my former life at Nalco that you have your sniffer equipment. And one guy died, didn't have sniffer equipment, walked in, I'm only temporary. Let me just go in and get a meter reading. Boom, dead. I mean, just like that.
So at high levels, yeah, you're exactly right. It shuts down our ability to breathe. And within 5 minutes, you're dead. You basically are rendered unconscious almost immediately. And then within 5 minutes, you're gone.
Well, that was like my dad after he used the bathroom. We were always rendered unconscious as children. We learned early. But anyway, so
we digress.
That's me, Mike. Everybody knows. Sulfur, we have to hit it with, like you said, an oxidizer to convert the gas to sulfate. Is that how do we convert sulfur to get rid of that gas?
So when the gas combines typically with oxygen or an oxidizer, it converts to a solid. Kind of becomes a little black particle a lot of times in the water. And then we're filtering it with our media. So typically, common method to do it today is an air over filter media. Typically, a catalytic carbon works really well in conjunction with that. And what doesn't convert can get absorbed by the carbon. So sulfur at the levels most of us are going to run into is very easily dealt with that way. Again, that could be the same technology that would remove a little bit of manganese and some iron. So what's really cool about the new technology today is you never want to sell a system one size fits all, right? Because that always gets you in trouble. But with that said, at low levels, oftentimes we are taking care of, we're mainly going after iron, and we happen chance to take care of trace amounts of sulfur and a little low levels of manganese. And we call it a day and pat ourselves on the back, and we happily march off to the bank. But it's when we get into these higher levels that we have to understand our choices of equipment selection and go on. But we could talk about these subjects all day.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I know that's not the purpose of this podcast, but at least at this point.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the sulfur can get removed by the one tank wonder something a lot of times. But it's, again, I always tell everybody, here we go again, tell them to test. And so we want to know how many seats on the bus you're going to take up. If you overload it, everything's going to get kicked out of the back of the bus.
Testing is everything. We always have a saying that says if you test the water, it will tell us what we need to do. That is always true. And again, I hate to say it, but when I see the failures in the field, it's because people didn't take the time to test the water, to test it on site, to check our flow rates on our pump, use our 5-gallon bucket, not to use the white cups and see, is it colored or is there color or turbidity to the water when we draw it? If we get all that information, we can pretty much foolproof the equipment recommendation. But when we only have limited information, now we have to start making assumptions. And we all know we all have that shared problem, right?
Yeah.
Makes a out of all of us when we have to fill in the blank.
Yep. And I tell people, would you go to your doctor without a blood test? I mean, you're not going to go there. Would you trust the doctor that says, well, sounds like your gallbladder? Yeah. Maybe you have leukemia. I don't know, but
let's remove a kidney and see how you do.
See if it works.
Let's give that a try.
Yeah, we're same thing. I mean, we are water doctors here, and it's very important. But sorry, Mike here, we get on the preach train, but that's what we do the best, and we're trying to make you guys listening the best you can be, and you gain confidence, and you sell more stuff, and the beat goes on. Mike and I are starting to age out, man. We need some good guys out there with legacy. We need to create legacy, Mike.
Mike, don't forget the gals, because I'm seeing a lot of young ladies starting to come into the business, and they're bringing a little different approach, and it's refreshing to see.
Well, yeah.
Encourage all young people to consider a career in the water industry.
Of course, and my whole company is ladies. We're women. Denise, Rachel, Chrissy. So I'm trying to bring them on because they do absolutely have a different perspective. Same as us, but just a little different. It's refreshing, really is. So to get anybody into this industry, it's a great industry. It's wonderful. So with that, Mike, thanks for listening, everybody. And I thank you, Mike. And I don't think this is going to be the last one with Mr. Heatwole. It's just been it took up to 60 of these podcasts to elevate to Mike Heatwole caliber. So I appreciate you doing these with me. And as I always say, trust the frog, everybody. Thank you for listening. Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Yep. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everybody out there, for listening, and happy sailing.
Yeah. Thank you.